generic engines are dangerous.
Ooh, we got another Ryan discussion up in here.
Um,
I never noticed the second fat snack in the background.
It's cute.
Are they all intentionally fat?
That's what a Tsuchinoko is. It's just a fat snake. It's like fat in the middle too. It looks like it swallowed a basketball. I don't know why that's. I know Japanese people, they got all these cool yokai stuff, and they're like, oh, we need a cryptid. Snake that swallowed a golf ball.
Several golf balls.
Just kind of phoned it in there. I think it grants wishes or something goofy too.
It grants wishes with its golf ball.
It's just
basically saying that. So, Dave, you're going to be arguing that generic engines are good for the game,
okay,
and good for deck building, and I will be the counterpoint to that. So you may start when ready.
A generic engine in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is any small set of cards that kind of run independently from the rest of your cards in your deck. They can be used to serve some sort of summoning function or to search back row or whatever you need that card to do, as long as that engine is serving your deck's greater good and going towards its win condition, that is an engine you would like to play. And generic engines in this game are super important because, especially when it comes down to rogue decks and things like that, you may need supplementary engines in order to get that deck to work, and the more generic a deck engine is, the more likely you can actually wedge it into a deck and have it actually be good for the deck and not just make it brick or whatever. Because whenever you're mixing engines, you run the risk of, instead of playing a good hybrid deck, you're just playing a bad version of both of the two. So the more generic engines we have in this game, the more options you have when deck building, and the more creative the player base can get when constructing their dueling deck.
Very nice. So having generic engines that anyone can use in the game, I think, is actually a detriment to deck building. To go right ahead there, because in this case of Dangers, everyone is playing it. Everyone is playing the same 10 or so cards. So the meta now is Luna Lights, with Dangers, or Thunder Dragons, but also with Dangers. They kind of have taken over the meta game and are less of a deck building tool and more of a necessity. With other generic engines, you also run the risk of just it being too good. So not only is it helping the rogue strategy, but it is also helping the meta strategy. And when the meta can use the rogue strategy to do better, it means that they're going to break it. And they are very good at breaking open rogue strategies. Main engines. Okay, Dave.
All right. Are you giving me a minute?
No, I'm going to stop you at 30 seconds. I just don't feel like resetting it.
Okay. Not every generic engine in this game is created equal. Dangers are clearly a problematic deck building tool, not because they are a generic engine, but simply because their mechanic themselves in their own little bubble is not healthy for the game. They are, after all, a bunch of walking upstart goblins. However, generic engines like Terror Top or Fusion may lead to some meta decks mildly abusing these, but they give other rogue players and even other meta deck options different deck building options.
The reason that having too many generic engines in the game, or having a really solid one that a rogue deck can play, is great for the rogue deck. And again, going back to what I had just said, the meta decks then break that open and abuse it, and then Konami has to take care of it. So having too many good generic ones means that your Speedroid players can't play Terror Top. It means your Burning Abyss can't play Tour Guide. It means your Gem Knights can't play Brilliant Fusion. Closing statement?
Engines make decks go. Without an engine, your deck will just be normal summoning its opponent to death. And that is neither fun nor interesting to play. Engines make decks work, and without generic engines that you can splash into decks that desperately need it, even whether they are tier 1 or tier infinity, are important because it makes the game work and feel like Yu-Gi-Oh! Without these generic engines, the game starts feeling like something decidedly different, and we just can't have that. I would love my Terror Tops back. God damn it!
All right.
It's so free!
I think that engines should be more carefully thought out to help specific archetypes and specific types. Having too generic of an engine really does just mean that Konami is going to have to hit it on the banner sooner or later. Having something that is a little bit more specific to fire types or pyro types or something like that, the wind machines, you have that aspect of it rather than just a sheer generic like dangers or like the brilliant fusion with just lights or whatever like that. So that's that would be my thought. Okay. So let's pass the question off to you watching at home. What do you think? Oh, hey, Marion, you're still here. Do you think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is better off with more generic engines that can help the rogue strategy? Or do you think that it is too dangerous to have too many good generic engines? Because then the actual good decks can take advantage of that and break it and ban them. That's why I don't want generic engines. I want my Terror Top back.
I just want my top.
And brilliant fusion, because yeah. I
think generic engines are fine. It's just the ones we have now do a little bit too much. You know what I'm saying? They reeled it back a little bit. You know. Because Brilliant Fusion was like one card Skull Dread, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of insane. If they made it to like, oh, we have this generic engine where you draw, I don't know, one card instead of fucking Pot of Green with Skull Striker, you know? I don't know. I think reeling it back a bit might.
So, again, trying to more specific, like to limit the availability or the usability of certain cards.
I would say that my actual opinion somewhere. I don't like seeing every deck running Dangers. Although I kind of like Dangers as a deck. It's an interesting, fun, and different mechanic, which normally in Yu-Gi-Oh just means bad.
Mm-hmm.
And no, this kind of Dangers almost kind of prove the point that in order for something to be good in Yu-Gi-Oh, it needs to be broke. If it's not broke, it's bad. I was having this discussion with Jason the other day. I was like, if you're not first in Yu-Gi-Oh, you're last. It doesn't matter if your deck is great or if it's okay or if it's bad. X5 is X5. Like, your deck needs to be busted. And that's just kind of how the game works. And in order to make a fun, weird, worky engine like Dangerous to work, they all need to be soft, like, not hard once per turns. They all need to just keep being able to activate. They all need to just keep garnering advantage because all they do is discard themselves. Like, the deck needs to function that way for it to be good. Mm-hmm. And that's a shame that's kind of how generic engines need to be for this game. Like, even in a deck that is supposed to use the generic engine, even like, for instance, Terror Tops, or in Terror Top wouldn't be good in Speedroids if it wasn't as super generic and free as it is. It's like, that's why it works so good. It's why it's good in that deck, because it's just good. So, like, it's very hard to make an engine with restrictions be good in its deck if it's just not on paper very good. Like, it needs to be good. And that's kind of a problem. Like, because think about it. You're not always going to draw your in-archetype engine card when it works, when it's actually able to activate, if it's got a million restrictions on it. Oh, because we don't want like the tier 1 deck to use it, so we got to slap a bunch of crap on it. Well, now it's just a bad card. Like it ceased being a good card for your deck, and it's now just a bad card. And that is the constant juggling, the struggle, the balancing act that everyone at Konami who's printing these cards must have to do every single time they print anything, because it needs to be generic enough to work, but not so generic that it becomes a problem. But it almost needs to become a problem because we need to sell packs. So it's like what do I? Well, like I'm not sure there's even a solution to this.
Yeah, the business side of things is you want your cards to be in every deck. You want people to buy the packs so they can, or buy singles from the people who bought the packs so they can put the cards in their deck. You want people to be playing the cards. If you make too many good cards only work with specific decks, not everyone's gonna be playing that deck, especially if you put the busted card in a bad deck. There's lots of examples of that I totally can't think of off the top of my head.
I can think of one.
Tune table of contents.
No, it was actually UA. What is it?
Turnover tactics. Yeah.
There
are many.
A quick play spell that shuffles every monster your opponent controls into their deck. That sounds busted.
Yeah.
But it's a UA,
it's bad. It's bad.
It's stuck in a bad deck. So because no one's going to play turnover tactics because it's not generic enough. If it were maybe you control 2 Earth Warriors or something like that, it might see some play in Gokis.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, because like turnover tactics is a brilliant actually. It requires 2 UAs on board in order to work. You shuffle your 2 UAs
with different
in,
names.
and then you shuffle your opponent's monsters into their deck. If used against an extra deck, they don't get to summon guys to replace the guys. It's basically a quick play spell version of a Cyber Jar, I guess, if you want to call it that. So if you shuffle extra deck monsters, they don't get to replace their dudes. So like against like an extra link board or something like that, it's absolutely a just blowout card. It's searchable in that deck. It's fan-freaking-tastic. The problem is the deck doesn't like to play like that. It doesn't have a reliable way of putting 2 monsters on board against a bunch of things you'd want to use the card for. Like if you were opening, you could probably wombo combo and set it like a cheese, but now you're using it to actively deconstruct the board you've just made. Like that's like the card was made very strong and very powerful, but its activation condition in how ungeneric it is makes it unplayable. Like Isolde is another great example. In Noble Knights, she's fantastic, but Noble Knights are a fucking dumpster fire of a deck, and they would have an absolute bear of a time making her if you couldn't just make her with 2 warriors. Like, she needs to be generic so she works in that deck, so they can play something like Junk Forward and then summon boars. Like, yes, I got 2 monsters on board. My deck's actually working, as opposed to like what it would have to do normally. It was like, what? I don't know.
Like mid-draw.
Open Brothers?
Yeah,
like,
so.
Oh God. Like,
yeah.
like these broken ass freaking cards need to be generic so the bad deck can run it right. But then you run into this stupid problem where, well, Gokis is objectively a better deck than Noble Knights, and it's doing exactly the same thing, spamming some warriors to the board. So yeah, it's definitely going to use that stupid card because it's better at it. So it's like, and that's a damn shame. It's almost like you would need to put in the extra effort to really analyze an archetype, really analyze its strategies, and then tailor a card to do exactly what that deck needs, like that only a pro player of that deck could actually do. And I don't think that's something that the Konami R&D department will never do, because they have to do too much, test too much, print too much.
Double Helix is a pretty good example of doing it right, though.
Double Helix.
And I think that's because the OCG was like, oh, hindsight, we exactly Spiral needs. They need a link monster because they can make a bunch of weird random levels all over the place that don't have any synergy with each other and get all this empty advantage. What the hell are they supposed to do with all that? Oh, how about a link monster? A link monster, duh!
To be fair, the OCG is very, very, very good at making better cards for TCG exclusive archetypes. Their track record is Guru, Beatrice, and Double Helix. All right, those are 3 legit cards.
I think they did an FA too, didn't they?
The FA link. She's also alright at that. The OCG knows how to make TCG archetypes so much better.
They do. Like, I don't know. Like,
Insane.
I don't know how Beatrice wasn't already planned or whatever. I'm wondering if it's a corporate thing. Like,
I would assume.
If you told me that like Jerome, he had all of his Burning Abyss laid out on the table and their little like proxy doodles, and he's like so proud of it. He's like, and then he's got his wife right here, best card in the deck, and they're like, and then some Konami reps like, yeah, that's definitely gonna be a OCG Shonen Jump promo. Sorry about that, brother. And he's like, but Bay, like Dante, that's why he's even in hell. You can't not have her as a card. I mean, they're like, yeah, but shut up, Jerome. So
why is Jerome like the Jar Jar Binks of the Konami department?
Because he's the only TCG
he's the only one.
He's the only one.
He's the only one that actually works for TCG of North America. Like.